Welcome back. All right, so I'm going to point this out. This is something that the hockey sports forecasters got going on. So they've got a 5-year roster where they say, hey, 5 years from now, we think the roster is going to look like this. And this Core 6 idea, which I talked about in the last video as well, I've seen it before. It's something that I saw in other annuals years and years gone by. And I always thought it was interesting because I always thought it was interesting to look back, say 5, 10 years down the road and say, all right, did these prospects make it? Did these guys that somebody said, hey, this is going to be the future, did they make it? Now, I'm going to start with the Core 6 for Boston as well. Because you'll notice there's some big names that aren't there. Because 5 years from now, are they still in Boston? I don't know. And again, part of the thought process here is something simple. The flat cap is being ignored by a lot of people. That the cap is not going up for a minimum of 3 years. There are some veteran players signed to a lot of money that teams are going to have to bite the bullet on and either do buyouts, maybe they're going to have to make trades. But when all these young kids are due to get paid, it's going to get interesting. It's only going to get worse, I think, over the next couple of years in terms of teams hitting the cap, hitting the ceiling. And not only that, but owners losing a lot of money. So with the way that players owing money to the owners is going to happen and all this, it's just going to get uglier. So let's dive right in, shall we? And so for Boston's Core 6, again, I'm starting with the Core 6 in this one. Last time I'm going to go through this. Because honestly, I think it was just something fun I threw on the board. I thought that'd be a fun thing to throw on the board. And that's what everybody's focusing on, which is just, all right. And there's no depth charts because I've done depth charts to death in the off season. And I don't want to do depth charts because it's just me looking and go, all right, so here's all your... And then it always becomes, well, you missed this guy, this 6th-tier prospect from Kazakhstan that scored 48 goals against his mother last year. So, it just becomes just minutia. And so I don't want to do that. I want to do just your general overview. Now, the Core 6 for Boston is tricky because they, much like the Washington Capitals that I already talked about this morning, their future's murky. Now you have Pastrnak, absolute top line forward, going to score lots of goals for a long time. His line mates are older. So Studnicka maybe ends up being that center. Maybe, right? There are Bruins fans that believe in Bjork. I'm not a person that thinks Bjork's got that elite offensive talent that's going to be needed when the older guys keep getting older. And DeBrusk. DeBrusk is absolutely good. And remember, for the Core 6, I'm looking for guys who are 26 and younger. If I go with a bunch of veterans, it doesn't matter. I might as well just throw the depth chart up there, and then people can get mad at me about who's on what line, because you got to get mad about something. And then on the blue line, I went with McAvoy and Carlo, who are absolutely going to be the 1 and 2 guys. And then the question becomes one of, does Boston have enough depth on that blue line to continue their level of success over the last few years? My answer would be probably not. And then goaltending, to me, is the giant question mark. Is Swayman going to be the guy? And again, Boston's one of those teams that's had plenty of goalies of the future, and they have a hit-and-miss relationship with them. As much as Tuukka Rask has been great for a very long time, I still remember other goaltenders that might have been flashes in the pan, or maybe guys that they cultivated and brought along, and then it just didn't work. I'm wearing an Eddie Moog jersey. He doesn't count because he came over from Edmonton. So there you go. So we'll see if Swayman's the guy for Boston. All right. Their last 3 years, 2017, 2018, 112 points. 2018, 2019, 107 points. And this year, it projected out to 117. And this year was really kind of a fantastic year, mostly. They did take advantage of the extra point, though. The overtime loss point, they abused it to death this year. Now, out of their lineup, Krug, who went to St. Louis. Chara, who is still in flux, may very well still come back to play. He is waiting until the NHL announces his return to play officially, and then he'll make up his mind. He's been in regular communication with Don Sweeney. We'll see what happens. And then Joachim Nordstrom, who's gone to Calgary. I think the Flames are going to like him as a depth forward. I really do. And I think Boston, I think this is key. They lose their best offensive defenseman. They lose their most veteran defenseman, a leader in the locker room too. And they lose a depth forward. And their big ads are Craig Smith, who can put the puck in the net. He's a 20-goal scorer, maybe 30, right? Playing with the players he's going to be with. And I put Kevin Miller up there because he was injured all last year and he's supposed to be back this year, so that's why there's an asterisk, because he's been a Bruin a long time. But it shows there aren't really any big additions. I know they're still, at the time I'm recording this, they're still apparently interested in Hoffman. They might be interested in Halla. There might be other players. Maybe Vatanen joins the blue line. But there's a lot of unknowns for Boston. And I kind of felt like against Tampa Bay, it was clear that Tampa Bay was way up here and Boston just was not able to get there. And you can have the debate of whether or not it would have mattered if Rask was in net. Here's the trick. It wouldn't have mattered. Halak wasn't the reason they lost that series. That was just Boston being overwhelmed by a Tampa Bay team that said, not this year. Now, we'll see how it works out. Now, the Hockey News has them 4th on their power rankings. Sports Forecaster had them finishing 3rd in the Atlantic, which means Toronto and Tampa 1st and 2nd. And I have them finishing 4th in this very difficult division they're supposed to be in. However, the record against teams in that division is intimidating. So we'll get to that. Now, who was too low on the scoring last year? Bjork, I will say this, probably should be scoring more than he is. But that's been said throughout his career. Sometimes it's due to injuries, he's not scoring. But anyways, 58 games, 9 goals, 10 assists, 19 points. Ondrej Kase, 55 games, 7 goals, 17 assists, 24 points. And Charlie McAvoy, 67 games, 5 goals, 27 assists, 32 points. So, Kase, of course, we've talked about his goal scoring for a while. I think he has the talent to score goals. It just hasn't happened regularly enough for me to justify that opinion at this stage. And Charlie McAvoy, who now that Chara and Kruger are gone, should be counted on for more points and more offense. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. And rookie to watch, this is one of those spots, man. Boston makes me a little bit nervous. I went with Jacobs Borrell because I think he's most likely to make it. I guess Vakanainen might. But the fact that I look at their prospect pool and I say, I don't know, I guess Borrell maybe gets into the lineup finally. He was a 2015 first-round draft pick. There's some depth problems when it comes to their overall prospect pool, which will happen when you're up near the top of the league regularly. Goals for, and you're trading first-round draft picks as well, right? Right. Goals for, they had 3.24 per game last year, which was 9th. Goals against, 2.39, which was 1st. So, again, whether you want to give the credit to the defense or the goaltending, it's up to you. But I think both probably aren't going to be as solid this year as last year. Power play, 25.22%, which was 2nd in the NHL. Their penalty kill, 84.26%, which was 3rd in the NHL. You add those numbers together, it adds up to 109% altogether, which means when you add their power play and the penalty kill, their special teams are excellent. And that needs to continue this year if we're going to see them staying at or near the top. It's going to be difficult. It is going to be very difficult for Boston to do that. Because remember, they'll be starting the season without Pastrnak and without Marchand. And when they come back, what kind of shape are they going to be in? Can Bergeron stay healthy? Can Krejci stay healthy? There's a lot of veteran question marks when it comes to the health of this team, and that's something to consider as well. Now, their coach, Bruce Cassidy, is able to get this team at or near the top of the league regularly, and one of the best coaches in the league. The general manager, Don Sweeney, does a very good job to keep things together, but at some point, that's going to stop. At some point, Boston's run at the top is going to come to an end, and again, this may very well be the year. Glass half full. Elite regular seasons. This is a team that finds a way to get points in the regular season. Like I said, they did abuse the overtime loss, shootout loss point a little bit last year, but they still, their points, it wasn't pretty, but they got there. They ended up with a President's Trophy, and then they lost, because that's what you do when you have a President's Trophy. But here we are. And the experience. The experience kind of rubs both ways, where you have guys who have the experience. They've won before. They've gone on long runs before. They also have a lot of mileage. And so that's the issue when it comes to Boston. That really is the issue when it comes to Boston. And glass half empty, along that line, last hurrah, with a question mark, like is this it? Because you remember, Rask and Halak, both of their contracts end at the end of this year. Rask has been very open, I think, about the idea that he is considering walking away from the game and that this year may very well be his last. And that's how that works. Some players, as they get older, they're like, I want to keep playing. I'll play into my 40s. And some of them say, I've got a wife and kids at home. I've made a lot of money. I'm going to go home and spend time with my wife and kids. And no hard feelings either way. So This may very well be their last hurrah. I'm not sure if the team's good enough. I'm not sure that losing Krug and Chara and not replacing them with anybody from externally, bringing back Kevin Miller helps a little bit, but I don't know that there's enough there. Next big hype, I went with Johnny Beecher. Now, he did end up not being able to play for Team USA at the World Juniors, tested positive for COVID, all that other wonderful stuff, but he is still projected to be a pretty solid player. And I can say next big hype because I think due to not playing at the World Juniors, it might be easy to overlook him. Guys who don't play at the World Juniors may end up with a lot less hype than the guys that do. Now, month by month, in October they were 9-1-2, November 9-2-3, and then in December it sort of fell apart. They were 6-4-5, and this guy was dropping them down the power rankings because of the fact they only won 6 out of 15. But because they had so many wins in October and November, it looked like I was just being mean. But they weren't playing well. January 6-3-2, it got somewhat better, but again, that's 10 overtime losses in 3 months. It's a lot. Overtime and shootout losses. They didn't win a shootout all year. February, they then decided, okay, if we just stop going to overtime, that'll help. And they were 11-3-0 that month. And then March, they were 3-1. So Boston finished on a high. Then the play-in round ends. Boston has a decent spot. They get past Carolina, and then, of course, Tampa Bay ends it. So the question becomes one of, can Boston go on another run? I don't necessarily see it, not with the blue line as it's currently constituted. However, the record against teams in their proposed division, pretty solid. They were 3-0 against Buffalo, 2-0-1 against New Jersey last year, 2-0-1 against the Islanders, 3-0 against the Rangers, 1-0-2 against Philadelphia, 2-1 against Pittsburgh, 1-1-1 against Washington. Washington and Philly are the two teams in the division that beat them more often than they won the games. However, again, you got the overtime loss points, right? So you don't count as being under 500 because that's how the NHL works. Their overall record against their potential divisional opponents, easy for me to say, 14-2-5. So that's the interesting thing to me, is that as tough as this division looks, if Boston plays these teams as well as they normally do, at least as well as they did last year, they might end up with a pretty good season. But it'll be interesting because, again, as the core gets older, the current one, these guys who are going to have to be that core going forward, how are they going to perform? And are the Bruins going to go into some sort of a rebuild? Is it going to be a retool? What's going to happen? We may find out as soon as this year. I do see them getting further away from the cup rather than closer to it. I want to be wrong. I'm a Bruins fan, but I'm realistic too, and I think they're that projected 117-point season, that was a great year for them. Regular season was very good, but I don't know that they can replicate that. And as much as they owned these teams last year, it's going to be tough to repeat that this coming season. But let me know your thoughts in the comments section below regarding the Bruins. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.